Hi, thanks so much for joining me, Ian, for today's Coffee and Chat. Ian is a fantastic photographer. He's been named the Master Photographers Association International Pet Photographer of the Year. He's won multiple international awards for his photography. He sits on the board of the Master Photographers Association, which is one of the longest standing photographic associations in British history. And he runs Origin Studios in Hertfordshire. Ian, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks. I'm not sure I live up completely to your wonderful introduction, but that's brilliant.
And you'll notice I didn't say your surname because I knew I would screw it up. So could you just tell us in your beautiful
Ian Boichat with a French accent. It kind of works, but I answer to most things, to be honest.
Brilliant. Well, I've asked Ian to join me today to talk about photography, but specifically photography that involves dogs and children, and that includes babies too, because very often we see cropping up on social media platforms or even free stills on image libraries, examples of young children or babies being laid on or leaning against dogs, or young children hugging, squeezing their pet to create what is perceived a really cute image. But actually, when you use your animal behaviorist eye, we can start to see subtle and sometimes not so subtle stress indicators. And also, if we think about just the actual scenario itself, it's high risk when we're placing young children and infants in that proximity, leaning against, laying on top of dogs. So this is all about how can we ensure the well-being and safety of all are considered. And Ian's here to sort of share his experience, some nuggets to help pet owners who want to get a good snap, and how to do that by keeping everybody safe and minimizing stress as much as possible. So that's a big intro, Ian. I'm going to hand over to you and ask, what's really going on behind the lens when we see these great photos from a photographer versus what we might see online, for example.
Well, I think you've used the word safety a number of times, and absolutely, whether it's a dog or a human in the studio or on location, clearly that's at the forefront of, even before we get the image. I think we said before, some dogs don't like flashes, so we test for that, and obviously babies have to be kept at certain temperatures and safe, and so that's all really important. And obviously, one of the things that people that have got a phone and a baby or a dog and have tried and taken lots of pictures will realize it's actually quite a difficult thing to take a really good picture of a dog or a really good picture of a baby, which is why people like me still have a job, which is great. Having said that, if you then try and take both of them together, then it's more than twice as hard. It becomes, it's quite difficult. It's hard enough to get just the dog right and to work with an animal. And when you introduce another element like a human, it's also that just makes it much harder, and also increases the risk by bringing the two together. So, yeah.
Absolutely. So what when we're looking at some of these images that are copyrighted to photographers, how are we getting some of these superb stills? How do you achieve that in your particular situation?
Well, I think in general, it's going to come down to the individual animal. If you've got some dogs that are beautifully well behaved and the people trust implicitly with the children or the babies, whatever, then they can work nicely together. You do get that unicorn scenario where they come along and everything comes together beautifully, and the dog poses beautifully and the baby poses beautifully, and we get that snap. That really isn't always the case. And it has to be said, much like Hollywood, to get some of those amazing images, we do cheat a little bit. And that is essentially what we do, is we would composite multiple images together. So I've seen pictures of dogs pushing prams, for example, with a baby in it, and clearly that dog's got no control over that pram. And even if it's the nicest dog in the world, that baby could get flipped out of there, in an instant. But I know, and clearly the person that was there on the day would know, that was done with two separate shots, one with the baby in the pram, and then probably many attempts to get the dog to put its paws up on the pram with lots of cajoling. And in other instances, you'll see, where hidden hands are literally would be in the shot and then removed afterwards, or so, you know, guiding either the animal or the child or children. And that also comes down to in many cases the animals will be on, to use the American phrase, a leash or a lead, that's going to enable some element of control by a handler out of the shot, and then that's simply removed with the aid of Photoshop so that it looks like it was completely natural. So these are things that you wouldn't expect, you know, an everyday person to do, and they will try and repeat or perhaps copy these types of images without realizing perhaps how they were done, and then, you know, that can cause problems.
Absolutely. I think we've seen lots of examples where there's some beautiful images, whether you've talked about the baby in the past with me being suspended, but actually the baby's incredibly safe and is laying on a solid structure, and it's all just taken out in post, which is fantastic. But to the layperson, you might not realize that. And I think that's the risk, isn't it? If you can't afford to go to a professional like yourself, who's got a real not only expert eye in what you do in terms of photography, but also you are well versed in canine body language, so you are always conscious of those stress indicators and allowing them time to adjust in the studio. It is that high risk when somebody's on their own and their dog's dozing, they think, oh, isn't that cute, let's just stick baby next to them, because they may not be aware of some of those more subtle signs, and also the risk that can happen. You know, 1/40th of a second time is their reaction speed compared to humans, which is around about 3/4 of a second. So in terms of some examples, you've got a brilliant example recently of puppies, haven't you, Bernese, that illustrates what a composite looks like. So, tell me a little bit in brief about that.
I mean, the image that hopefully you'll be able to pop on the screen. I mean, this was a breeder's litter, and essentially, there's in reality there's only 2 crates, and it was done with some very clever editing and joining the images together. Actually controlling one puppy with a handler was virtually impossible. So to control 5 all at the same time would have been, and in fairness, I've done it with 5 before, with 3 handlers, and removed 3 handlers from an image before. This was much easier. Just do it the way we did it, and actually every single dog in that photograph was actually on a lead, just to make sure that they didn't rush off. Otherwise, you know, what would have been a relatively short shoot could have taken, you know, days.
And I think, you know, they always say never work with children and animals. So to your point, very often to achieve that awesome photograph, it's just, it's very rare you get those unicorn dogs and those moments. So you're absolutely right. Thinking back to then people who might not be able to afford going to a professional, where, you know, safety is first and foremost at your mind, how can an owner take a fairly decent shot that minimizes stress and the risk as much as possible at home?
I mean, I think it's going to depend on a number of things. It's really going to depend on the age of the children that you're putting with the animal. It's going to depend on the size of the animal. I mean, if it's a small dog and the child can hold it, then there's probably little risk. If it's a giant, you know, I'm not going to pick on any particular breed, but if it's a large dog and a very small baby, then there are different factors to consider. And I think if you know, a quick search online would tell you that, you know, a lot of the pictures that people are taking aren't really all that. They literally kind of, it's the baby on the bed next to the dog, and it's a picture of the baby's bottom and the dog looking really disturbed. And it's like, you know, do you have, are these worth getting? I mean, you know, for that sort of, I'm surprised they're getting many likes on social media for those sorts of images. Now, I've seen others, however, which are absolutely beautiful. Again, I don't know the circumstances to which how they were shot, and what, you know, that particular animal. Every animal is different and every situation is different, and they're absolutely beautiful. But they are few and far between. The majority of the images, you know, that people tend to get, because it's hard, aren't always that great. So is it worth the risk if, you know, if there's a possibility of any kind of injury? But again, that really comes down to the person knowing their animal, preferably having a helper on hand. And, you know, and just knowing what might happen, you know. But
and there's got to be
The-
choice, hasn't there? In terms
Absolutely, and
of,
there's risk in everything we do. I mean, more people are killed, falling downstairs than they are attacked by terrorists. But you feel free to cut
let's
that
not
out.
go there.
It just we wouldn't hesitate to walk downstairs though. That's my point. So there's always a risk, and so I like pictures of children with animals as much as the next person.
Yeah, and I think, there are ways in which we can take a nice family shot on our mobile or with a camera, if you've got a decent camera at home, without having to have the child sitting on top of the dog, the baby leaning against the dog resting, and you shoving the child in shot just to capture that moment. There are better ways of doing it where the dog is, if your dog is nervous, if your dog is highly excitable, then, to stick your baby right next to that child, that dog is not going to be appropriate. However, if you've got, as you said, a really passive dog that is well exercised, they're chilling out, and the child and the dog have got a good relationship, so they can sit near each other, but their space, they're not kind of holding on for dear life to that animal. I think that can make for a lovely shot. I've got loads of those with my own, but it's always about knowing your dog, as you said. It's about knowing whether your child, if they're young children, will listen and they respect the dog's space. And coming back to your point about, is it worth it? And it's not, is it? It's really not.
No, and I think ultimately it's with as I say, with children, they are going to have that relationship hopefully with that animal because they've been with that animal for hopefully a longer period of time. It may be a new animal to the family and to an older child, or but if they've been together for a while, then that shouldn't be a problem. But I think the issue with newborn babies is they are 2 weeks old, maybe 3 weeks old, or they're young, very young and quite vulnerable. And the dog may see them as a threat to its place in the household. You don't know. And so what might have been a very passive, gentle dog before, this is a very new thing for them. So, obviously, if you've got a dog already, you hopefully will have taken real care to introduce that baby to that animal over a period of time. You'll make sure the dog doesn't feel left out, so it won't fit. So hopefully they can have that great bond in the future. But dogs are funny like that.
Yeah. And the thing is, there is data out there, some really good data that shows us when infants particularly are crying, that raises blood cortisol levels in the parents, but also in the pet, in the dog. So, we can't underestimate that just because the dog looks okay and is not exhibiting really obvious stress behaviors, that the arrival of the new baby is not having an impact, even if we can't see it, obviously, as the parent or guardian, but also making sure that if we do take some images, your point, got to have more people around. Don't just grab it in that moment when you're on your own, and just safety first. So what I'm going to do is, within this post, I'll put within the commentary some links to body language videos, so people can have a better understanding of what the dog may look like when they're feeling uncomfortable, as well as links to Origin Studios, so you can find Ian and have a look some of his amazing photos, which will flash up over this chat. But Ian, is there anything, last takeaway point you'd like to give us before
I suppose the other takeaway point I would like to give is that, look, as humans, we don't necessarily like having our photographs taken. As adults, we may step there and go, and not kind of present well on camera, and let's be honest, if you're fussing around with a dog trying to or to make it look good in a photograph, it won't necessarily like it either, and as you said, the signs sometimes are very subtle. And sometimes they're not so subtle. Sometimes you can look at these pictures that people have taken and you look at them and you think, that dog's clearly not happy, or so why post a picture of a dog that looks unhappy? It's not even, but maybe people need to understand the signs better, and that's something obviously you can help with.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where, if you are stuck and you want to know more, always engage the services with a certified trainer and behaviourist. There's some really good people out there. You can go to the Animal Behaviour and Training Council for a list of certified practitioners, and also have a look, as I said, at Ian's Origins website. And I'm sure with your Masters Photographers Association, there's a list of trusted photographers on there. Is that right, Ian?
Absolutely, yeah, there is, yeah. The MPA.com, yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today, and take care.
That's great. Thanks. Cheers, Hannah.